Have you ever had the displeasure of coming across someone who thinks they are the manager of the universe? Well, I came across one of these creatures right at the entrance to my new neighborhood. This woman, who looked more like a suburban morality inspector, presided over the HOA as if she were the mayor of an invented city. You know that this doesn't comply with community regulations, energy? Multiply that by 10 and throw a little ignorance with a fake smile on top. That was it. I had just moved in. A new house, further away from the center, where the silence of the night isn't pierced by sirens or motorcycle exhaust. I wanted peace. I dreamed of peace. But what I got was an electricity war. Literally. For the first few days, everything seemed normal, until I received a note. Yes, a note, because this creature apparently thinks email is something for young delinquents. The note said, in handwriting as rigid as her, "I notice that there are visible wires hanging from the side of your house. This violates the aesthetic standards of the HOA. We request immediate correction or action will be taken." That's it. No hello. No welcome to the neighborhood. No we like your garden. Just a veiled threat with a whiff of cheap legalism. I laughed. I thought it was an exaggeration. After all, it was just wires from my security system and a temporary extension to install a camera I was still setting up. But then came the stares. Every day, there she was, pretending to walk her dog, who, by the way, seemed to hate her as much as the whole neighborhood did. She would go round and round in front of my house, trying to disguise that X-ray look. And me? I pretended not to see. Then, out of the blue, my electricity bill tripled. I thought, well, I'm almost an energy monk. LED light bulbs, air conditioning only after 10 at night, fridge in economy mode. There's something wrong here. I know my consumption history better than I know some of my relatives. I called the energy company and asked for a check. The technician came over, tested everything, and let out a, "Strange, your house seems to be drawing more load than usual, but there aren't any appliances connected that would justify it." The look on his face said it all. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't want to get involved. That's when my investigative side, half paranoid, half ex-customer, wronged by a cable TV company, woke up. I started observing my house like a detective in a film noir. And guess what I found? A very thin, almost imperceptible wire buried near the back fence. Curiously enough, this wire ran in the direction of the home of the citizen president of the association, the same one who complained about my aesthetically offensive wires. Yes, she was diverting energy from my house. She'd set up a clandestine power-pulling system, hidden behind a shed which, according to her, was an ecological sustainable gardening project. A project so ecological that it needed industrial fans, 1,000-watt light bulbs, and who knows what else running into the early hours of the morning. Now, think about it. The woman tried to be the neighborhood vigilante, but she was stealing my light in the dark? I didn't know whether to laugh or take the hose and wash her face with cold water and shame, but I did neither. I decided to wait. I started monitoring the times, the peaks in consumption. Every time the lights flickered in my house, I wrote them down. I monitored it for a whole week, and I swear, if I'd put a timer on it, I'd have put together a complete diary of her criminal gardening system. The icing on the cake? When I went to confront the HOA about the irregularity, the HOA itself came forward and said that I was violating the neighborhood guidelines with unauthorized outside equipment. The nerve was so great that I thought she was going to fine me for being a thief. I knew she was going to get burned. I just didn't imagine that the short circuit would be so literal. After discovering that my electricity bill was paying for my neighbor's botanical Disneyland, I went into a mode I didn't even know existed. It became a personal mission. Every day I'd wake up, drink my coffee with a mixture of caffeine and hatred, and peek through the crack in the curtain at that damn shed that looked more like the clandestine laboratory of a frustrated villain. It wasn't difficult to gather evidence. All you had to do was pay attention. The woman had an ego bigger than her intelligence, so she left traces wherever she went. Fans running all night, a hum that sounded like the engine of an airplane about to take off, and a disgusting green light that escaped through the gaps in the windows as if she were growing aliens instead of plants. One night, I almost found myself laughing out loud, alone, just imagining her explaining to the police that it was all for organic mint. Seriously, I could hardly sleep properly, but every time I saw my electricity bill rising, I gained more fuel, not from the socket, from the soul. But I didn't just want to prove the theft. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to taste her own poison, or, in this case, her own darkness, for a week. I did what anyone with a shred of dignity would do. I called my cousin, Leo, an electrical installation technician. He had worked in industrial maintenance for years and had that, give me 15 minutes and a pair of pliers, and I'll sort it out. Look, I showed him everything. The buried wire, the tripled bill, the nocturnal hum coming from her greenhouse. He was silent for a good few seconds. Then he let out a, "What a prick, man." Leo made a quick inspection, and, with the smile of someone who was enjoying himself, confirmed the woman had literally drawn power from my power box. And the most disgusting detail, she was using expensive adapters, the kind that are designed to leave no trace. It's the work of someone who knows what they're doing. In other words, she wasn't just sloppy, she was a criminal with a method. The next day, we called the electricity company. But, of course, nicely. An anonymous tip, without my name, without an exact address. Just the clue to the detour and the type of equipment involved. They were thrilled. It seemed like they'd been waiting all week for this kind of call. They said they'd send a team in 2 days. I had my popcorn ready. On the day of the inspection, I stayed at home. Leo, too. We pretended we were going to renovate the roof, just to have an excuse to stand outside and watch the whole thing. The company truck arrived with 2 technicians and an inspector. The 3 of them looked very unfriendly. As soon as they set foot in the yard, they went straight to the point where the wire crossed the land. They dug with that technical flair, and that was it. The pipe of shame appeared. I swear, it was like seeing the truth emerge from the ground. A thick black wire, with a double connection and professional insulation. A small crime buried in the middle of the pitch. The guys didn't even have to go to her house. They called in reinforcements, a chief inspector. It turned into an operation. And guess what? In the middle of the afternoon, the miracle happened. Her main circuit breaker went out. Yes, dear reader, she had no electricity. And not just the house, the greenhouse, too. The humming noise stopped. The green light disappeared. And the silence that followed was more beautiful than any symphony. Half an hour later, she appeared, furious, with a red face, messy hair, and a high-pitched voice like a chainsaw. She started shouting at the technicians as if she were their boss. "You can't do this without warning. This is an abuse of authority. I demand an explanation." But the guys didn't budge. They showed her the paper, they showed her the cables, they showed her the equipment, and out of nowhere she went mute. Mute like a child caught with its hand in the cookie jar. She tried to argue that someone must have installed it without my knowledge, as if the whole greenhouse had been assembled by electric fairies. But the inspector had heard this kind of excuse before. He said he was going to record everything, that the case would be referred to the fraud department, and that she could face legal action for energy theft. And there, for the first time, I saw it. I saw the fear. I saw her lose control. That woman, who lived with that little smile of authority, turned pale. She went mute, and the best part? She was in the dark. Her house spent a whole week without power. 1 week, 7 days, 7 nights. No fan, no light, no heating projectors in the greenhouse. And me? I slept like a baby. Of course, she wasn't going to accept this defeat without trying to turn the tables, because people like that, when they lose, don't learn. They rebel. I thought that after everything, after being left in the dark for a week, after being caught with her mouth in the socket, literally, She was going to disappear, hide behind her flowered curtains, stop patrolling the neighborhood like a B-school sheriff. But no, that woman simply didn't know how to lose. And worse, she didn't know how to shut up. On the 8th day, when the power finally came back on at her house, because yes, she had to ask for it to be reconnected with an official inspection and everything, she decided to turn the situation into a spectacle. She set up a kind of emotional stage in front of her house. Literally. She hung posters on the fence saying that she was the victim of a smear campaign, that the neighborhood was under attack by infiltrators who wanted to destroy the unity of the community. It sounded like the ravings of people who drink conspiracy tea for breakfast. And, of course, she began to do what these figures always do when they're cornered: victimize themselves. She started going door to door, clapping her hands, with that "just listen to me for a minute" look on her face, handing out leaflets with a text that looked like it had been written by a positive energy coach on a reality TV show. It talked about injustice, about spiritual challenges, about dark forces trying to silence the pillars of the neighborhood. The audacity! I was paying for extra energy to support her light tank, and now she was the one being silenced? There was a moment when I sat on the sofa and stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out if this was a bizarre dream, or if the whole neighborhood had been abducted by some kind of cult, led by a frustrated former yoga teacher. But the best was yet to come. She decided to call an emergency HOA meeting. And what's more, she didn't officially notify anyone. She just scattered little notes among the residents she knew still listened to her, about 5 stray cats who thought she was some kind of spiritual leader of their sidewalk. Of course, I went, because if there's one thing that motivates me more than justice, it's seeing the circus on fire. The meeting took place in the community hall, the same one that's only used for old people playing dominoes and useless votes on whether or not to paint the fence beige or cream. When I arrived, she was already at the front, with a folder full of papers and a thermos that probably contained more poison than tea. She began her speech like someone presenting an award. These are difficult times. There are people who don't respect order, who don't respect peace, who want to turn our home into a war zone. And there I was, sitting in the back row, trying not to laugh. Then she said, "I've been sabotaged. I've been persecuted. And all because I tried to bring sustainable development to this community. Development that, according to her, involved pulling wires from other people's houses to maintain a greenhouse that didn't even have a permit." The golden moment was when she pointed, without naming names, but looking directly at me, and said that certain residents were infiltrating the neighborhood with the sole aim of destabilizing collective harmony. I swear, I almost stood up to thank her for the compliment. But what she hadn't counted on was the twist. While she was speaking, one of the neighbors, Marcos, a man who had lived there for about 15 years and was like everyone's grandfather, stood up. He spoke quietly but firmly. "The harmony you talk about so much has never existed. Not with you controlling everything. You don't want peace. You want power." The room froze. She tried to laugh it off. She pretended not to be upset. She said it was natural to have opponents when you do the right thing. But then another neighbor stood up. Then another. One by one, they began to tell little stories of abuse. The absurd fine for a non-standard plant. The summons because her son's car was parked on the street for a night. The note threatening a fine for using Christmas decorations before the statutory date. When the third person told her that her electricity bill had been increased for no reason, and she began to suspect some clandestine connection, it was as if the curtain fell. The woman lost her poise. She tried to shout. She tried to turn the meeting table into a makeshift courtroom, but no one wanted to listen. She stood there, talking to herself, while the residents left one by one, without hurrying, without looking back. I stayed until the end. Not because I wanted to watch her collapse. That had already happened. I stayed because I wanted her to see that, even at the last second, no one feared her theater anymore. That night, the neighborhood slept in silence. For the first time in months, there was no buzzing, no green lights, no letters slipping under the door, just silence. And just when I thought the show was over, the woman decided to appeal. Because, after all, when you have no more power, you try to be a martyr. And then, my friend, the embarrassment was broadcast even in the neighborhood group. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave your like and comment below.